I think we will kickstart.
Yep. All right.
Great. So, good morning, everyone, and we welcome you and we thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here. Join us on this webinar between ZENfra and Balata data. So, today's session, we've titled it as From Reactive to Proactive, the IT Lifecycle Crisis that's costing US enterprises millions. So, over the next 30 to 45 minutes, we are going to unpack why so many organizations are bleeding money through reactive IT asset management, and more importantly, what a proactive approach would look like, and also backed by real customer case study. So, before we get into it, let me introduce who you will be hearing today. First, we have Patrick O'Brien. He is an enterprise sales and customer success leader at ZENfra. Patrick is a result driven leader with deep expertise across cloud, AI, cybersecurity, and talent solutions. He partners with organizations as a trusted advisor, helping enterprises drive scalable growth, optimize operations, and achieve measurable business outcomes. And he knows how aligning technology solutions with real business impact. So, welcome, Patrick.
Thank you.
And joining him is Zach Broom. He's the co founder and SVP of Channel Sales at Balata Data. Zach was recognized by CRN as a 2026 channel chief. And over the past decade, he has helped enterprises to realize more than $1 billion in data center savings through smarter IT lifecycle management. So, welcome, Zach.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that, Rekha.
Great. So, I think we'll dive in to our session. So, Pat, my first question is to you. Now, looking at these numbers on the screen, what do you think are the biggest challenges that organizations are facing in managing their IT assets today?
So I think the biggest challenge people face today is visibility across their entire technology stack, their servers, their storage, their network services, their software, data protection. And now we have hyperscalers, right? So things are moving out to environments that don't look like traditional assets. So managing over that estate is a huge challenge in the asset lifecycle management because it's not just about hardware asset lifecycle management, it's about software also. So in a hyperscaler, you still have to maintain software currency. I think visibility goes beyond just what do I have, right? What is the state of that asset or of that machine? Do I have appropriate patches? Are there any known vulnerabilities or patches that the vendor has provided? Are there security vulnerabilities that need to be addressed? Do I have the right amount of capacity, right? From a hardware and a software perspective, am I compliant with regulations in my industry? A lot of industries now are mandating that everything's encrypted. Is your hardware and your software capable of encryption? So I think those are a lot of the challenges many of us face today.
Right. So, Zach, as continuation to what Pat said, right, I would like you to throw some light on when you are engaging with customers, what are the common signs that you know that the life cycle management is not being handled proactively?
Yeah, I think a lot of, and thank you for that question. I think a lot of customers, and we kind of alluded to it, there's so many things going on. There's so many newer technologies, and customers are looking for how do we adapt? How do we evolve? How do we kick off our modernization projects? And a lot of their legacy assets often get overlooked. And so they kind of get stuck in this status quo model of saying, okay, we have this vendor for this, or we have this renewal coming up for on a support side, as an example. That's our cost. It is what it is. And you renew and you move on, or, and they fail to just say, hey, let's take a look at this. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it, but if we just take the time, whether it be an hour or a week or whatever it is,
to really see what we're spending in this other area, we find organizations are spending probably 50% more than they should on support or legacy devices. We find that they're not capitalizing, especially with today's supply chain constraints, they're not capitalizing on any sort of value that still retains with their legacy environment. And so they're going to their e-waste company, and which is great, but they're not getting the value out of that. The e-waste company is coming in and picking up this gear. They might be charging for this gear. So organizations are spending more money than they need to. And what we find, here at Balata is on those e-waste activities, we're actually writing checks to our customers for millions of dollars each month for their legacy environments, because it's important for us from a Balata side, which we'll get into momentarily, where those spares or that legacy equipment is really important for us, companies like ours, because we constantly need spares for our maintenance customers that are still running legacy environments, whether it be their DR site or what have you. And so just having a partner that can really holistically look at those legacy assets often drives significant savings that help offset some of that net new acquisition cost.
Got it. So, what you see on the screen is basically a Gartner's report, which shows that at the moment, as fewer as 35% of organizations have adopted managed lifecycle services today, right? But that's expected to jump up to 70% by 2028. So, this question is for both of you guys. So, I'll let you guys take turns. So, from each of your experiences, what do you think is going to be driving this shift?
Pat, I'll let you go first if you're okay with it.
Sure, sure. So I think what's driving the shift is some changes in the industry, first off. So a lot of asset cost profiles are changing. There are shortages in assets, so we need to be able to refresh more effectively. Cost pressure associated with those shortages is creating a need to be more optimal or efficient when we do look at refactoring our capacity. So being able to reduce capacity or increase capacity across sites is absolutely driving corporations to look better at asset management. Compliance is also, like I said in the prior question, the need to be compliant with new regulations that require encryption, that require RTOs, RPOs. A lot of things in Europe are now around cyber resiliency that needs to be baked in to a lot of our solutions. So are we kind of keeping pace with that? And I think that's a lot of it. Zach, I don't know if you got
Yeah, no,
anything
that's
to add.
great. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Patrick. At the end of the day is how do we refresh or how do you modernize more efficiently? And organizations are realizing as whether they're moving to the cloud or doing on-prem refreshes, whatever it may be, they realize there's a need for all of our legacy assets, whether it be everything from data erasure to decommission projects to other e-waste activities, asset recovery value, who's going to support our legacy assets during this migration. That's a lot of vendors to manage. And so organizations really need to start looking at, and what we find they're having success with is looking at who can we partner with and keep this all under one roof to check all those boxes and get this in a programmatic way where people like Patrick and ZENfra and Balata partner together can do all that heavy lifting behind the scenes. Really take a look and say, hey, okay, you've got this kind of money in your assets right now that we can purchase back to help offset the net new acquisition cost. There's really no need if you're migrating from HP to Lenovo or vice versa. There's no need to spend money on the legacy OEM support because depending on what the gear is, a lot of the firmware security patch updates are open source now. So you're additionally protected there. So there's really no sense in paying that money to the OEM. And so organizations are really looking for a partner to deep dive into their legacy environment and figure out ways to save. And by having a partner with that and creating some sort of program around that, it just makes it incredibly easy so folks can start looking at the more important things. This is important too, but the more important things in terms of how do we keep up? How do we keep our customers happier? How do we, modernize faster? How do we keep up with the ever, demand that's building up? So that's where we see a lot of this adoption coming from.
That's great. So, Zach, this is very specific to you, right? So,
Mhm.
with IT asset disposition services, right? How
Mhm.
do you see would be a bigger shift when it comes to, say, migrations or refreshes or even in their asset management?
Yeah, so you can't do migrations without ITAD or a proper ITAD procedures, right?
Mhm.
Patrick alluded to it. Data compliance, data security is incredibly important. And so you want to make sure you're partnering with an organization that's going to handle that data properly. So when any or data bearing devices are being removed from a location or from a customer, we want to ensure that that chain of custody and that chain of custody is documented all along the way up until you get the certified erasure report with serial numbers, et cetera. That's objective number one because data security is the most important. Objective number two is how do we get that gear out at a proper timeline that meets with your refresh cycle? Because what we see organizations or what's hindering organizations from moving faster is, let's say they're moving to a new NetApp solution. I still say EMC, but we'll say a Dell EMC solution. And if they're migrating off equipment and that gear is supposed to land in 6 months, organizations are ready to get that spun up as fast as possible. But what's happening is they're in their minds, it goes back to the multi-vendor situation. We've got to find somebody to who's going to decommission it, who's going to decable it, who's going to data sanitize everything, who's going to, securely pack it and erase it and show us e-waste. And then, by the way, is there any asset recovery value here to help offset some of that net new acquisition cost? And so we see from an ITAD perspective, being able to offer all of those services under one roof, it makes it incredibly easy and it keeps projects on schedule.
Perfect. So I have John raise his hand. John, you can leave your question on the chat and we will get to that towards the end of the session if that's all right. Great. So I would like to ask this question to both Zach and Pat. So with Balata and ZENfra coming together, what impact are we aiming to create for the organizations or the enterprises?
Pat, I'll
Pat,
let you
would you
go on
like
this
to
one first.
say that?
So yeah, for me, it's about creating vision. So first and foremost, right? You can't manage what you can't see. So creating unified visibility across the estates so that we can make better decisions, so that we can make sure that as data centers are ever evolving entities, that things come in, things go away, being able to continually keep discovery going, keep updates going, our patches coming out that we need to do, right? We kind of spoke to that a little bit earlier. So how do we kind of keep our environment across our physical data centers, our cloud data centers, our microservices, our AI platforms? How do we kind of keep all of those things in sync with the technologies that we need to do today? And I think ZENfra really kind of helps to do that, right? It brings you that holistic view of the world that, from a software and hardware perspective, keeps you in compliance with your requirements and with your asset lifecycle management strategy. Zach, I don't know if you
Exactly.
want to
And
add
I would,
anything.
yeah, and I would say to your point, so ZENfra is kind of the brains behind the operation, if you will, where Balata comes in, we're more boots on the ground. So we partner with ZENfra to get all of these analytics, deep dive into the inventory list, asset list. As much as we want to say yes to everything, there's a lot of times we're going to say no. And ZENfra and the Zenlytics platform allows us to do that. And when we find, hey, okay, this is a yes for us, we're going to be the execution partner to go in there, actually have boots on the ground, do the decommission work, do the actual maintenance work. So whether it be, a 24/7 SLA, a next business day SLA, we're going to be the ones dispatching engineers and parts on site to make sure you guys are covered from a maintenance perspective. And then also making sure we're doing all the decommission work and data sanitization work, whether it be on site or off site, when ZENfra makes this decision.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. So, Zach, again, I'm coming back to you on this, right? So, we have a real world scenario here. That $475,000 in savings is huge. So, this savings can be used by businesses to invest in other innovations or look at developing some new product, right? Now, can you walk us through on how you help the organization achieve this kind of a savings?
Yeah, so this goes back to the proactive approach versus reactive, right? A lot of organizations, when they're ready to refresh. In this case, the customer was refreshing from HPE to Lenovo, and the customer originally had a strict budget of $2.5 million. So, and that's the whole encompassing project. The reactive approach that most customers were used to was, okay, we're going to get this Lenovo refresh. It's $2 million. It's going to take us 12 months to get off our legacy gear. So we went to HP to get support. That was $750,000. Then we went to our decommissioned vendors and logistics partners to remove those assets. And that was about $50,000. So this whole new refresh solution was looking at $2.8 million. If we can make that shift to be proactive, what we did was say, okay, here's your Lenovo refresh. It's still the $2 million. In this case, it was some DL380 Gen 9, so it was a little bit older technology. We said, hey, a lot of these firmware and updates is open source. We have access to it, so you're not going to be vulnerable from a security standpoint. And additionally, from a spare parts perspective, we stock everything locally, what we call FSL, so forward stocking locations, and with our own engineers. So we said there's no point in renewing with HPE because they're one, way too expensive. We cut that support in half by going to Balata. So they saved, $325K right off the top. On the decommission side, what we found was there was actually $75,000 worth in asset recovery value, right? And so we deducted those decommission costs. So you're still getting the data sanitization, the logistics, the decommission work, but you're still netting an additional $25,000 because of that asset recovery value. So we were able to take the overall solution from 2.8 down to 2.3, saving one, then now coming under budget plus saving extra. And this was really important to the customer at the time as well, because they had other initiatives that they needed to spend money on, whether it be software, security, other applications. So this opened up more room in that budget to be able to do so.
Well, that's great to know. So now, Pat, what I would like to ask you to throw some light on is if you can walk us through the proactive lifecycle management journey, what that looks like, right from the process that we start with the discovery to the implementation.
Absolutely. So look, I mean, in the end of the day, you can't manage what you can't see, right? So the first step in our process is discovery, right? That's seeing everything. And when I say discovery, I mean all your server storage, software, and looking at CMDBs and your CMDB, your vendor logs, and taking all of that data as inputs into the process. So in Zen Analytics, we have an AI engine with a data lake that actually creates intelligence out of the information we collect. So the next phase is driven by that data lake, right? So are the assets we found in your inventory end of life? Are they end of support life? And letting you know before you get to that warning point so you can be proactively planning forward. So part of what we do as a part of a good process is to help people to foresee the end of support life coming. Are there security vulnerabilities? Are there RTO, RPO gaps that you're not achieving today that we might need some extra capacity or performance for, and then we can compensate for that? Seeing cost and optimization signals like capacity is reducing, capacity is growing. How do we kind of stay in alignment with that? Are we not having enough utilization to justify keeping around assets? So Zen Analytics, ZENfra helps you to see that, to kind of quantify that in your environment. And then, of course, part of it is how you execute, right? So controlled execution. So we have an action tracker. Basically, a project plan is a part of ZENfra that turns all of the insights that we come up with out of the risk intelligence and the discovery. We turn that into an action plan or a workflow that you actually can measure your environment progress. So your asset refresh planning, your maintenance schedules to make sure that you're keeping things up to date. Licensing, not just at a hardware level, so you reduce the amount of storage, but do you have equivalent licensing or software licensing on the side that needs to be consolidated? We help to manage that. And when you're decommissioning a box, to what Zach was talking about, a lot of times we're taking a box off the floor. As you go through that process, making sure that the box and those process flows continue beyond the visibility going away. So as you're turning off a box, visibility inevitably goes away. Having an action plan and a workflow that tracks that through leaving and returning the asset to Balata so that you get that credit back at the end is a really important part of the asset management process, right? Or lifecycle process. The other part is data and compliance, right? So you got to be able to prove and govern the environment. So our analytics engine, not only do we look at your CMDB, but we can actually provide you Delta updates that can be provided to your CMDB. So when you're done, your CMDB is better than when we started. So we are going to give you the discrepancies in your CMDB so that you can update that, or you can keep ZENfra in and leverage that to keep a consistent update to your CMDB. Audit reports that are ready to run. So as an example, if you're financial services industry, you might have heard of a new regulation out of Europe called DORA. A lot of American financial services companies that provide services there, you need to be compliant with DORA now. So we do have compliance reports like that and very similar reports that we can provide you that help to better manage that. That is a part of asset lifecycle management. Can you put encryption in place, right? On the assets you have? Those are all audit points that you might want to consider. Patch tracking, making sure patches are there, and process deviation. So I talked about RTO, RPO. If you have a 24-hour RPO, are you actually achieving it, or are things slipping outside that window that you don't know about? And is that something we need to deal with as a part of your asset management, lifecycle management process to enhance that capability or performance to work better in that situation, right? Today, I mean, just my opinion of what happens today, when we hear about an audit, people scramble to collect data, make the data defensible, clean up the data as we provide it. So I think this process not only gets you a better asset lifecycle management process, but provides you that defensible data you need from a compliance perspective. So I don't know, Zach, if you wanted to add anything to that, but
I think you covered it. I think you hit the nail on the
yeah.
head. There's not much more I can say there.
Great.
Sorry, I went a
So
little long, but
So I think John has a question here. I'll read out the question and I'll let either of you guys pick this. So John's question is, with increasing cyber attacks, how do we eliminate the risk and doubt in trusting third parties to handle these migrations and cleanup?
Patrick, you probably have a little bit more experience on the migration side.
So the only way, right, from a third party perspective, a lot of them have certifications that ensure that they are doing those things, and those are audited. But if it was me and it was, I'll say, my butt on the line, I would be doing my own audit to ensure that that vendor is complying with the things that I need to happen. So if they tell me I have an RTO of 24 hours, are they actually delivering that? My data is encrypted, showing me that the hardware is on a compliant list that has hardware encryption. Those are some of the things that I would do to make sure that your service provider is complying with the regulations that you need to comply with, and that they are complying with the terms of their contract. So every service provider operates on a contract that says what they deliver, they should be delivering. Did that answer your question, John, or?
So John, if you wish to ask as a follow-up question to this, please leave that on chat. So my last question to both Zach and Pat here, right? What kind of outcomes could the organizations tangibly see when they move from a reactive approach to a proactive one?
Well, I think number one is the obvious. One, you're going to save a ton of money. But as I mentioned previously, when we were talking about data erasure and sanitization, that comes priority number one. That's priority. I think from an outcome perspective, you can expect to save a lot of money. So with those funds, you can expect to move faster, quicker, and maximize your budget a heck of a lot more efficiently. Those are kind of the glaring outcomes that we see. We see organizations saving so much money. We see them modernizing incredibly at an incredible speed by having a lifecycle management partner on the back end to do a lot of this busy work, and sometimes not even just from a personnel perspective, but from a financial burden as well, eliminating that from organizations so they can focus on what you do best, and that's modernize, grow, and scale and evolve.
Perfect. So, Pat, would you like to
So
add anything on this?
yeah. So what I think is a real advantage to the strategy is we're going to reframe conversations from things that IT people talk about to things that business leaders talk about. So a lot of the problems I find when you actually, and I ran data centers, so when you go to management around, hey, I want to do a refresh, I need to pull these boxes and replace them. You know, leaders don't understand or don't care about your asset inventory, your life cycle policies that you put in place, your patching. What they care about, right, is am I going to save money? Are you going to reduce my risk? Are you going to protect my revenue? Are you going to keep my employees working and not have them sitting idle because something went down that I needed, right? And better understand I'll say less tangible cost of not being proactive. So what does downtime cost you? When something breaks, what is it going to cost to your business? When you don't have either vendor maintenance or third-party maintenance involved in a server and it goes down, how much extra money are you going to pay to scramble and get that server back online? And I've had many cases where somebody said, oh, it's not mission critical. But when it goes down, you couldn't tell the difference, right? Everybody wants it fixed immediately. Everybody's down. It's got to be better. So having a good asset management and a third-party maintenance provider or an OEM maintenance provider backing you up is absolutely essential. Making sure that you're doing things, are provisioning things and not over provisioning or under provisioning things, and you're not wasting money on licenses that you don't need, and that your security and compliance profiles are correct. So I think when you asset lifecycle management really enables your business as a whole, and changing that conversation to those things will help to build the case for better lifecycle asset management.
Great.
Yeah.
So, for everybody on this meeting, we are open for questions. So, if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them on the chat and I'll have Pat or Zach answer them for you.
It may have covered it all. Okay.
So, Zach and Pat, whilst we're waiting for anyone to ask questions on this, is there any key input that you would want to leave the audience with tonight or today?
Yeah, I would just encourage you guys, if you have vendors that, whether it be e-waste or third-party software vendors or third-party maintenance providers currently, I would encourage you just, again, we're not going to apply pressure for you to make switches if it's working, but I would encourage you to keep them honest. What we've seen is there's been a lot of complacency in the market, whether you're using a certain vendor for 5 years, 10 years, or 15 plus years. What we found is they tend to continue to increase costs year over year. And then when we look at it holistically, we say, hey, we had a customer in California as an example. They had been with the same vendor for 10 years for maintenance. And we looked and said, hey, they're spending $1.2 million a year on post-warranty support. We looked at it and said, there's absolutely no way you should be spending about $450,000. So you're looking at, $600,000 that they were just assumed that that's what it was. That was the market rate. And so for us, I would just encourage you, if you're considering it, if you're looking at things, if you're looking at refreshes and you're like, hey, how can we offset some of this acquisition cost? Just give us a look. We'll tell you, use us as free consultants. We can tell you if it's worth money, if it's going to cost money to remove. Just use us as free consultants, and we'll point your feet in the right direction regardless.
Perfect.
Yeah, and to that end, if I was going to add anything to what Zach said, I would say that for me, it's about getting an accurate, holistic asset baseline, right? So, and I would do that like if it was me, within 30 days, I would try to have a baseline established where here's everything I have from a software, from a network, from a storage, from a data protection perspective, get that baseline in place, because you can't really be proactive about your cost, about your risk, about your life cycle management decisions unless you can see everything in your environment, right? So I think a lot of challenges come from the lack of visibility that we all have. It's not that we have bespoke systems. The network guys have their management system. The storage guys have their management systems, and the server guys have their management systems. And by the way, the hyperscalers have their management systems. Having that holistic view and inventory really starts to make some decisions very obvious for you. So if I had to kind of make any recommendation to people, it would be try to get to that baseline inventory within like 30 days so that you can really have a good discussion. If you don't have the tools to do it, we do have ZENfra capability and assessment capability, like Zach said, that we can help you to kind of get through that. And I'd be happy to have a discussion with anyone around that. And then create an action plan from that, right? So there's obviously some low-hanging fruit that might come out of just that assessment. You might find out in some spaces you have capacity you're just not using that we can eliminate. You may have licensing that you don't need anymore that we can eliminate. So a lot of that visibility might yield some low-hanging fruit that you can go out. There may be some assets you decommission and Zach buys them back, right? So that would be my recommendation.
Perfect. So we don't have any questions from the audience. So I guess that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you all for joining us, and a big thanks to Zach from Balata and Patrick from ZENfra for sharing such valuable insights on moving from reactive to proactive IT lifecycle management. So if today's discussion resonated with you, especially the $475,000 savings, we would encourage you to take the next step. You can reach out to us and talk to our team. Get yourself a complimentary lifecycle assessment of your own IT environment, and you can connect us with the contact information that you see on the screen. Just don't let your organization be the one that's getting that 2 a.m. phone call. And the window to get ahead of this is now. And we are here to help you make that shift. So I thank again to everyone who took their time to be a part of this discussion. And we look forward to connecting with you soon.
And thank you, Rebecca, for putting this
Thank
together. I
you.
appreciate everybody taking the time out to connect. We're looking forward to connecting with you all soon.
Sure.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.